Hey, weather's kind of crummy, so I'm going to try to do some transmission maintenance on my truck. It's at 33,000 miles, and it does some hauling, it does a lot of driving in the mountains, so I want to stay on top of the transmission fluid. And I've bought a couple of things to try to make that easier, such as a dorman pan with the drain plug here. You can probably see it through the bubbles. And I did buy some additional washers and a drain plug just in case it weeps and leaks. And I got this B&M 22200 dipstick because this truck dipstick is really just a plug this big right next to the catalytic converter. So to do this, I've already let it warm up a little bit. It was about 130 degrees transmission temp when I shut it off. So next thing I'm going to do is I crawled down there, put a wrench on it. I found 19 millimeter and 3/4 wrenches, fit it pretty good. I had enough room to get a swing to break it free, and that's all I did. Put the wrench on there with the engine off and got it to just bump free, so I know it's not going to be completely seized in place with the engine running. So next thing I do is crank it up, let it come up to temp, and then crawl under there and then back that thing the rest of the way out. And then check the fluid on the dipstick, and then just kind of stick it back in there, and then figure out where I want this dipstick to be mounted, because their instructions basically say to screw it back there to the firewall, but that's so far back that it's going to take a really long funnel at a weird angle to even fill the transmission. So that's where I'm probably going to spend quite a bit of time, is figuring out just where to put it, how to stand it out. It would be nice if it would come out here and mount to this, but I don't know that it's that long. But I'll take that into consideration here shortly. All right, here I am under the truck. The dipstick is this little plug, as I said, right next to the catalytic converter and right near the front of the pan here. Sorry about the horrible camera work. I can't see anything and get a light. So that's it right there. It's already broken free. It's still not fingered loose, but yeah, I'll crank it up, get some more temp in it, because right now it's probably 100 or so. So I'll try to get it up to closer like 150, and then pop this out, see where the level is, and then mess with the dipstick. Next thing I did, I just went ahead and kind of slid that down there, zip tied it up to here, just because, like I said, I kind of want it mounted to this so it's easy to reach. There's plenty of room. It goes all the way back there. I've got it off of the exhaust, and there's plenty of room down there to get it threaded in. So I think the next thing to do is go ahead and crank it up, let it get up to like 150, 160 degrees, crawl under there with some welding gloves on, and get that dipstick out, and then get this guy threaded in. Oh, and I've got the tail of the truck sticking out, a little fan to kind of help keep the exhaust out. And I'll go ahead and close the other garage bay door. All right, 132 degrees, getting close. And the main reason why you don't want to pull that factory dipstick out with the engine off is because of drain back. Now, I don't even know if it would be a problem. I've never tried it, but I'm not going to take that risk because, again, this dipstick doesn't have any marks on it, so I need that fluid to be exactly where it is now so I can get an accurate mark on that at whatever 150, 160 degrees temperature. So just keep that in mind. This is what I was afraid of. The fluid is just barely on the end, so basically at the low of it, and the transmission's 175. Which is fine. I guess I don't even need to cut a mark at 175. It's at that low mark. At least it's on there. So I'm going to let it warm up some more. I might crawl under there and try to tighten it up a little more. It's basically an AN hose with aluminum ends. So, like I was saying, 3/4 19 to get the original plug out, which is here. And as you can see, goes a lot further in. So the fluid was at 150, 160. It was at the top of that. The lower hashes there. Not quite up into the upper hashes of the original one. So this really needs to be longer. Or that AN hose needs to be slightly shorter so the fluid would be more up in the middle. But at least it's on there. It'll work. I'm going to let it warm up some more and then stick it back in there and see if there's any difference, and then I'll probably crawl under it and try to tighten it up some more. Here's the arsenal of tools that I attempted. When I'm doing aluminum AN, I like using my old race car tools. I quit using -8 AN a long time ago, so I don't even have a 6 wrench. I've got a 10, and then I've got this adjustable. And this adjustable, great tool, and it's aluminum, so it's good on aluminum fittings like that. But everything here, since it's aluminum, has to be bigger, and it just wouldn't fit between the transmission lines, catalytic converter, heat shield. So this guy right here, this is a 200 millimeter. It worked. You know, it's still pretty big jaws, but smaller all around. Maybe the angle helped too. Notice how it's got more of an angle. So that seemed to work, but an AN8 would be the actual tool that you need. And if you're not familiar with AN hoses and race car stuff, they're okay. They're actually very nice, but yeah, see, I've got a 12 and a 4 for vacuum lines. And then I've got that big 16, and anyway, no wait. So AN is very nice. You don't have to put any dressing on the threads. They have a taper seat, kind of like a brake flare. So you just tighten it down really good. For something like this, I would prefer steel ends than aluminum, because the threads are a lot stronger, obviously. But this seems to be working fine, and I've just got this zip tied there. Length is perfect, so I'll just figure out a way to mount it with a bigger zip tie. So when you're down there, really the only pain about AN is getting the threads to line up, because you've got the entire hose not wanting to bend and contort. It is flexible, but it just fights you, and so it's always trying to pull the threads crooked. So you really need both hands, and there's not a lot of room down there to use both hands. And you've got that hot catalytic converter right there, and the hot transmission lines, which have been an even bigger problem than the catalytic converter. Just, you know, reminding you that you're not supposed to touch that stuff. So it takes a bit of effort and makes your old man's shoulders sore getting it lined up. And then once you do get it started, run it down by hand until you feel its seat, grab the wrench, give it a bunch of twists, get it nice and tight, but don't sit there and try to just gorilla it to where you're going to wipe the threads off of the aluminum AN fitting or end. As far as the alignment, yes, it was giving me a hard time. So what I did was I removed the hose from the adapter, which really is just a standard AN to an AN O-ring fitting, and I put the adapter into the transmission first and then lined up the hose. It made it quite a bit easier. And that's where I'm at. Transmission temp is probably around 190 something. Fans just turned on, so the engine's up there. Yeah, we're at 190. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick that dipstick back in there, and then we'll see what the level looks like. It is at 190, just above that lower transition. So I'm gonna grab a little file, make a mark on there, maybe even punch 190 in it, I don't know, and call that part of this job done once I put a bigger zip tie on it or figure out how to mount it. And then I can start pulling the pan off, draining the fluid, and doing that stuff. Oh, yeah, mentioned that. Okay. There it is, marked it. One side was a little higher than the other, so I just figured I'd mark them both. You know, didn't really dig too deep in. Really just take the anodize off and get it deep enough to where the jeweler file you can feel it, you know, so it's more than a fingernail width. Alright, that's it. We're done with this part. Down and do this the right way. It came with 2 self-tappers. With it, you know, no matter what I do with this here, even if I made a bracket, I don't like that it's anywhere near this wire harness. The grounds I'm not as concerned about, but yeah, you know, with nylon, the sleeve, it's no big deal, but with a metal sleeve, you don't want that to cheese grate your wire harness. And then this has knurls on it, so I'm going to try to move it up here, but probably further down so it's pointing, over here, but not so high that you can't get to it. I'll probably try to do it at an angle so it's pointing out this way so I can get a funnel in easier. So let's get that zip tie out of here. Cool, I didn't lose it. And let's see, where can this go? Oh, we got EGR hook. There we go. Yeah, look at that. There we go. Something like that. Right there. Okay. I'm going to need both hands for this. Okay, this is what we ended up with. Got them run in there. It clears everything there fine. Those two seem pretty tight. I'll probably hit that one again. And I had this down here to catch any of the, screws that I dropped multiple times. And, you know, the chips from the self-tappers. Alright, this part of it is nearly done, and then I can go ahead and get under it and get the fluid out. So this is the wrong way to do it. If you want to do it wrong, you want to make sure that your cardboard is way down there instead of up under here where everything's going to splash out. And then you want your pan to be out of the way so you can get at the bolts. And then while you're working on these two that are up above the exhaust that you can't reach and you can't find your 8mm ratchet wrench, you want to make sure that those pop out before the front ones do, so the back spills down all over the exhaust because the fluid's got a lot of detergent in it, and so you're cleaning the exhaust pipe basically. And then once you get the pan slid over there and it's all full and you need to move it to get to the wrenches, you want to make sure that you slosh it so it splashes up in your eye. All right, pan's about ready to come down. It's still full of fluid, so I'm gonna slide the cardboard up here now and try not to make an even bigger disaster. I mean, you can see on that frame rail over there, I'm cleaning that with the detergent as well. Yeah, good time. Okay, I gave in and just let it all drain out the back. For whatever reason, there's a stronger gravitational pull back here than there is up here. So no matter what I did with the bolts, as soon as I'd have the front ones completely out, and as soon as I would loosen these back ones to try to let the front dip down, the back would just dip down, and it's got to be the angle of the pan just has more fluid in the back. So I quit wrestling with it. I already made a mess. And we've got brake clean, so the pan obviously still has some fluid in there, so now there's nothing in the back, so I've just got to pull the front two bolts out and then slowly lower the front of the pan and then let it splash all over the place. Sorry I can't set this down and let you watch, but this is just my phone, and let's see. Okay. Might be worth a laugh, or maybe it'll go smooth now that look at that, spilling more out. But I've got the cardboard up now, so that's good. Okay. Yeah, there's still quite a bit of fluid in here for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get this thing into place so I can't reach the bolt. Because that's what you really want, is to not be able to reach the bolt and stuff. A moment of truth. Oh, it's hung up on the transmission line. There we go. Got it. Oh, well, that was pretty drama-free. Right on, then. Huh. The filter just fell out. That's usually a bad sign from my experience with 470s. That means that the transmission has been warm for some period of time, and the O-ring has lost its elasticity. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't feel very soft. I don't know if these 6R80s aren't supposed to be as tight, but that's been my experience with 470s. If you drop the pan and that filter plops out, it's definitely time or overdue for a new filter because that O-ring is no longer holding. And when the O-ring no longer holds, there is a risk of the filter sliding out just a little bit under acceleration, and then air slurping around that O-ring. You probably can't see anything I'm talking about. I got my gloves completely greasy. Here's the pan. Doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's only 33,000 miles. It's got 2 magnets in it. Maybe that's why the back was heavier. Little bit of clutch material, but nothing too bad. So what I'll do is, with a rag, some gloves, some brake clean, squirt that down, get it as clean as I can, and transfer that over to the other pan, and then get the new filter up in the valve body and start getting the new pan on. And then from there, yeah, so there's some clutch material. If you know anything about automatic transmissions, each gear has a stack of clutch materials, and in between the clutch materials are steels. And then the clutches are splined on the inside usually, and the steels are splined on the outside. And so there's a piston that uses hydraulic pressure to press that whole stack together, and that's what engages the inner splines to the outer splines. That's usually how that works. And so every time it shifts, you've got that pressure releasing, and then the other clutch pack engaging. And then downshifts, does the same thing, and it does it really fast, so you don't feel the transmission slipping in between gears and hunting and the RPMs coming up. So every time it applies and lets go like that, more on the apply than the release, you've got slippage between those clutches and the steels, and so a little bit of this lets go. And that's to be expected. It's by design. The hotter the transmission, it seems, the worse that gets. The clutches can't really last as long under that kind of temperature. And these modern transmissions run very hot, as I mentioned before. So it's important that you change the fluid quite a bit more frequently. In old 475s or 470s, you could go 100,000 miles without a fluid swap, even in a vehicle that was pulling and stuff. And this 6R80 or the 6R10s, you might be able to get 100,000 miles out of a fluid change too, but it's just not worth the risk. They're so much more expensive to repair, rebuild, and they're so much more complex. So I'm just going to try to keep on top of this, and then once it has a drain plug, that'll make draining a lot easier. Recently, we had an Escape which used a similar fluid, and it did not have a removable pan or a serviceable filter. And the factory recommended transmission fluid change interval was like 150,000 miles. What at 130,000, 138,000 miles, that filter was plugged with this stuff to the point where it was losing its apply pressure. And then very shortly after that, the pump started to whine. And then very shortly after that, it would just lose all forward apply pressure and you would be stuck. And you would just have to sit there and rev it and go between gears to even get it down the street back into the driveway. So with those, without a serviceable filter, it's much more important to change the filter very frequently, or change the fluid, excuse me, not the filter. You can't change the filter. Changing the filter means rebuilding the transmission. So it's more important that you change the fluid very frequently, like 35,000 miles, definitely no later than 50,000 miles. Sure, you can make it to 100,000 miles, but if you try to go 150,000 miles like the service manual recommends, you might end up with a car that's worth less than the cost to rebuild the transmission, not to mention removal and reinstallation. And that's kind of where we ended up with that car. It's no longer part of this family. So I'm going to try to take care of this one because this one hauls and we drive through the mountains quite a lot. Here it is, new pan, new gasket, new filter. This is pretty hard, you know, I was talking about that, but you can see that it's not as hard as the old one. Like it is able to be squished around a bit. But if you pull it off, it's not like you can just collapse it like a regular O-ring. But it looks like the gasket is the right one for the pan, so I'm going to crawl back under there and then pop this in there and start getting all this together. We can get this thing set up. What is it looking like? We got a video going. Can't see much, but all right. Pan, let's lay it in all that oil. That's the front. Okay. And I don't know if I can the pan around the filter, but that's what I'm going to try to do. So the O-ring goes right up there. Press it up as far as you can, like so. That's as far as it'll go. Man, that's wanting to fall out too. Maybe that's just how 6R80s are. Probably. Nice big mess. Cardboard helped. Okay, that's no big deal. So far, so good. Oh, I should have brought some of those little pan bolts with. Been handy. I think I got one. Okay, line up the gasket. Easier said than done. Doesn't want to line up whatsoever. Got it. Laying right in that fluid, basically. Okay. So now we can try to clean up some of this mess. Okay. All that detergent on the floor there. Okay, more bolts. Oh, I didn't even look for my ratcheting 8mm wrench for those two right there. So I'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way. I had to ditch the creeper because I don't have this thing up on ramps, and I needed a little more room. Oh, dropped one. So those two are going to be the last ones to go in. When I tighten pans, don't want to over tighten them, especially when they're sheet metal like this. The gasket's metal with a rubber inner lip, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to worry about crushing it like you would with cork. But I like to tighten it in somewhat of a star pattern, not just going around. And then after you go over it once, go back over it a second time because it squirms. And so first one you tighten down might loosen up when you tighten up the other corner. Okay. That's a lot of bolts. All in all, everything looks pretty good under here. Kind of surprised the exhaust is as rusty as it is. I guess that's a 400 series stainless. This truck came from Texas. It's actually called you can't see that. It's called a Texas edition. Is that video worth anything? Yeah, you can't really see much, can you? Probably should just go ahead and stop. So I don't know if it was a beach truck. The frame looks pretty good. So there's no signs that it was around a whole lot of salt. All right. So once I get all of these in, except for those two, I'm going to grab the impact and just kind of zip it down slowly until I hear the impact give it one knock or so, 1 or 2 knocks in the pattern that I was talking about. This would be so much easier if it was up on the lift, but that lift I have, it's rated for 7,000 pounds, but I don't trust it like that. But this would be so much easier if I had, get up on ramps. My arm keeps cramping up. Can't really reach it without laying in all that fluid. Okay, getting closer. Yeah, left arm is, that's not doing me any favors. Okay, so good news is I should be done with this by lunchtime. Bad news is this exhaust pipe is going to smoke horrible. And it's not like I can back it out of the garage without transmission fluid in it. So far, so good. Filling this thing is a chore. There's no vent on 6R80s. So you pour in just enough until you see it. It takes a while for it to drain back down. And as you can see, I'm not getting a really good seal because funnels have the little parting line on there. So fluid, when it's up above that, just kind of weeps out. So I've got that around there. None's dripping, so it's not like I'm losing a huge amount. Just something to be aware of. And then this is what happens when you start pouring it in. You get about that much or a little bit more, and then you just wait. You see it weep out a little more, then you'll hear it gurgle. You just keep doing that. I am almost 4 quarts in, about 3.5. So I'm going to stop at 4 quarts. Google says a simple drain and fill should be 5 quarts. So I'll stop at 4, 4.5, crank it up, bring it up to temp, run it through the gears, start stabbing the dipstick in there to see where the level's at. We're at 163 degrees. I've already run it through all of the gear positions a couple of times, and while it's sitting here warming up, I left the dipstick out because I wanted to give this as much of a chance as I could for the tube to drain, so that way whenever I stick the dipstick in there, it's not picking up the oil on the walls of the tube and then giving me unrealistic reading. So that's what I'm doing. Probably gonna take another 5 or so minutes for it to get to 190 and then 165. And hopefully that'll be the end of this for the day. All right, just driving it around. It's fully up to temp. It's already gone through all the gears and everything is fine. 199 degree transmission temp, which is just insane to me, but that's the way they want it. Yep, goes through all the gears fine, locks up fine, so that task is done. All right, time to clean this up. That'll wrap this up. My experience, for me, I think it was worth it. The dipstick, that is. It was very expensive. It's like $200. I honestly don't think it should be that expensive. There's quite a few things I don't like about it that aren't really the fault of the dipstick, but just how the 6R80 is designed. There's no vent, so filling it is kind of odd. And it goes slow. You can't just like dump a whole quart in. You dump a third of a quart, maybe half of a quart, depending on the size of your funnel. It's trying to leak out of the bottom of the funnel, and then eventually you'll hear it gurgle, and then you just keep doing that. So it took quite a while, but other than that, it went okay. The dipstick itself is very slinky. It's more like a cable, and I've had cable dipsticks before. That's what I've got in the Falcon. And that's what I had in my Cobra back when I still had that thing. And this is much more limp than like the Low Car or even the Summit brand. So it takes 2 hands to kind of feed it in, and then even when you get it started, you try to push it in, it just turns into a noodle, so you gotta feed it in there. And then every time you drag it out, it's pulling oil all the way up that sleeve. So you've got to kind of dip it not all the way down and then pull it back out to try to clean that oil off of the sleeve so you can get an accurate reading on that slug on the end. So a bit tricky. I ended up putting about 5.5 quarts in, maybe a little less than that. And I probably would have been fine at 5. So my level ended up just barely over the marks that I carved into that slug, which might be better. A little bit more might be better as long as it's not overfilled. So I'm pretty happy with it. Not too happy with this mess. So I'm going to throw this stuff away, and then I think what I'm going to do is pull my Willys Jeep in here and get it up on the lift. It's got the top on it, so I've got to take the top off, take the doors off, and then fold the windshield down because this is a 11-foot ceiling. So with this at full height, or even before full height, it would be putting the windshield up into the ceiling. So I want to get that up in the air, and I've got a locker for it that I'm going to install on the front. It's already got an air locker in the back, so I'm going to put a lunchbox locker, I call them a clunker locker, in the front, which means you pull the axles out and then you pull the spider gears out, and this replaces the spider gears. So I'm probably going to start on that today. I doubt that I'll get it done today, but I got a couple hours here, so I might as well, if nothing else, get the Jeep in here and get that top off of it. So whenever I am ready to dig into it, I can just go. All right, thanks for watching. Comment, like, or don't.